Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. It started with a locked door and a smile I couldn't quite read. Al had that look in his eyes again, the one that said he knew exactly what I wanted and that he wasn't going to make it easy. I stood just outside our bedroom, the soft amber light from the hallway casting long shadows behind me. My hands were clenched, not out of anger, but because every second he waited made my heart race just a little faster. He always knew how to play this game. Only this time, I wasn't sure I was ready for what he had planned. We'd been married for almost 3 years now. Most days, we were like best friends, teasing each other over burnt toast or fighting over the last scoop of ice cream. But then there were nights like these, quiet, intense, when Al's voice would drop low and the energy between us would shift. He had a way of making the ordinary feel like something deeper. And tonight, it all started with one little word he made me say before he even touched me. Please. It wasn't just about power. It was about closeness, trust, knowing someone so well that even silence carried meaning. I hated admitting it, but the way he waited, the way he made me ask, somehow made everything more meaningful, more real. And it wasn't always about getting what I wanted. It was about understanding why I wanted it in the first place. That was Al's charm. He never rushed. He made moments last. That night, I stood there, heart pounding, half angry, half aching, whispering the word he wanted. I could hear the small laugh in his throat as he stepped forward, brushing my hair behind my ear like it was the first time. But he still didn't give in. No, Al had one more twist up his sleeve. Something I didn't see coming. Something that would change the way I saw him, and maybe even myself. Because behind the games, the teasing, the slow burn of our marriage, there was something deeper Al was trying to tell me. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear it. But he was. Right then, he leaned close, his lips barely touching mine, and whispered something that turned my whole world upside down. And just like that, everything changed. He whispered so close, I could feel the warmth of his breath against my skin. But the words he said weren't what I expected. They weren't sweet, or soft, or even romantic in the traditional sense. They were careful, intentional, like he'd been holding them in for a long time. It was something about trust, about earning each other, not just being given. And before I could react, he stepped away. Just like that, leaving me standing there, full of questions and wanting more. That was Al. He never did things halfway. He was the kind of man who paid attention to the little things, the way I stirred my coffee, how I bit my lip when I was nervous. He remembered every small detail like it meant something. And maybe that's what made this so confusing. Because this wasn't just a game between husband and wife anymore. There was something he wasn't saying. Something he needed me to see on my own. We met in the most ordinary way, through mutual friends, over bad wine and too much laughter. But falling in love with Al was anything but ordinary. It was a slow pull, like gravity. The kind you don't notice until you're completely under its spell. He made everything feel important. And now, for the first time in a long time, I felt like there was a distance growing between us. Not a bad one, just unfamiliar. I knew he wanted me to ask for more than just his touch. He wanted me to understand what I was really asking for. But that kind of vulnerability, saying please and really meaning it, was harder than I thought. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I was afraid of what it would mean to let go completely. That night, he didn't say much after that. He just looked at me, with those patient eyes, and let the silence do the talking. I stood frozen, torn between pride and desire, between fear and love. And just before he walked out of the room, he looked back one last time and said softly, when you're ready. I'll still be here. And then he was gone. But the ache he left behind stayed. And I wasn't sure if I was more afraid of losing him or of finally saying the one word he needed to hear. I didn't sleep that night. I kept turning over his words in my head, hearing them again and again, when you're ready. I'll still be here. They sounded comforting at first, but the more I thought about it, the more I felt the weight of what he wasn't saying. Al never gave ultimatums. He was too careful, too thoughtful for that. But this felt close. Like he needed something more from me, and he wasn't going to ask for it outright. He was waiting for me to figure it out. To feel it. The next morning, I acted like everything was normal. I made coffee, scrolled through my phone, and smiled when he walked into the kitchen. He smiled back, but it wasn't the same. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He kissed my cheek lightly, said morning, then grabbed his keys and left for work like it was just any other day. But I knew better. Something had shifted. And I didn't know how to bring it back. That afternoon, I called my best friend Leah. She knew our story better than anyone. She was the one who'd introduced us. I didn't tell her everything, just that something was different, and I didn't know how to fix it. She listened quietly, then said something that stuck with me. Al loves you, but maybe he's waiting to see if you still choose him the way he keeps choosing you. That hit harder than I expected. Because the truth was, I'd been coasting. Marriage hadn't been hard for us, not at first. We had fun, we shared the same values, we even argued well. But lately, between work and life and the day-to-day routine, we stopped seeing each other. I started taking his presence for granted. Maybe he felt that. Maybe that's why he pulled back. That evening, I sat in the bedroom, staring at the closed door where he'd left me the night before. I thought about all the little things he did, how he always saved the last slice of pizza for me, how he noticed when I was tired even when I said I was fine. He never asked for much, but he always gave. And now, when he asked for something as simple as a real please, I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to give it, but because I didn't want to admit how much I needed him. I thought about the first time he told me he loved me. It wasn't during some perfect moment. It was during a fight, when I was crying over something stupid, and he just blurted it out. Not to make me feel better, but because he meant it. That's the kind of man Al was. And maybe that's what scared me. He didn't love halfway. He loved with intention. That night, the silence in our home felt heavier than usual. Every sound, the ticking of the wall clock, the quiet hum of the fridge, even the occasional rustle of the curtains, seemed louder than it should have. I kept expecting Al to say something, to break the stillness with one of his usual half-jokes or those small but meaningful glances. But he didn't. He sat on the couch, scrolling aimlessly through his phone, looking calm on the outside, but I knew him too well. He was waiting for something. I sat across from him, pretending to read, but the words on the page meant nothing. My thoughts were tangled. I wanted to talk. I needed to say something. But every time I opened my mouth, I stopped myself. Because I didn't just want to talk. I wanted to say it right. And I didn't even know what right was anymore. All I knew was that I missed him, even though he was sitting 10 feet away from me. Then he looked up. Our eyes met for just a second, and I saw it, the worry, the hope, the distance. It all flashed in that moment. He didn't need to say anything. He was asking me the same question he had that night in the bedroom, the one he hadn't put into words. Do you still choose me? Even when I'm quiet? Even when I don't make it easy? My heart started to race. I stood up, slowly, my hands clenched at my sides. The silence between us wasn't angry. It was filled with tension, yes, but it was also full of meaning. Like we were both standing on the edge of something bigger than either of us had expected. And I knew the next words I said could change everything. Al watched me closely now. He didn't speak, didn't move. But I could tell, he was bracing himself. For what I didn't know. Maybe for me to walk away. Maybe for me to stay. Maybe just for the truth. My voice was barely a whisper when I said, Al, can we talk? He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. I took a step forward. Then another. And right before I reached him, he said something so quiet, so soft, that I almost missed it. But I didn't. He looked up at me, eyes steady but searching, and then whispered just loud enough for me to hear, You don't trust me the way I trust you. I froze. Those words weren't angry. They weren't bitter. But they hit harder than I expected. My heart tightened as I tried to understand what he meant. I thought we trusted each other, I believed we did. But something in his voice made me question everything. Maybe this wasn't just about that one word I didn't say. Maybe it was about everything I'd never said. I sat down slowly across from him, searching for the right words, but Al spoke again before I could respond. You know I'd do anything for you, right? I've always made space for your emotions, your needs. But sometimes, I feel like you keep me just close enough, never all the way in. His voice cracked just a little on that last part, and it broke something inside me. I wanted to argue, to defend myself. But deep down, I knew what he meant. I'd always been careful with love, even with him. Especially with him. He was the one person who saw the real me, and maybe that's what scared me. Because if he ever walked away, I wouldn't know how to be okay again. But then, just as I reached for his hand, he stood up. "There's something I didn't tell you," he said, eyes dark and unreadable. "Last month, I was offered a job in Seattle." My breath caught. Seattle. That was across the country. We lived in Chicago. Our lives, our memories, our routines, they were all here. I couldn't believe he hadn't mentioned it until now. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to pressure you. I didn't want to make it feel like a decision you had to make because of me, he continued, his voice quieter now. "But they want an answer by the end of this week." The room went still. Suddenly, everything felt different. This wasn't just about one emotional conversation or one moment of vulnerability. This was about everything, our future, our marriage, the life we were building. Or not building. I looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time, I realized he was tired. Not of me, but of waiting. Waiting for me to open up. To fight for him. To choose him completely. The way he had always chosen me. But with the clock ticking and Seattle looming like a shadow over everything we'd ever built together. I didn't know if I was already too late. I stood there in silence, feeling the weight of Al's words crash into me like a wave. Seattle. A job. A decision he'd been holding onto alone. And now, suddenly, it was our reality. I stared at him, my throat tight, heart racing, emotions tangled between fear, love, and something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time, urgency. This wasn't just about where we lived. This was about us. I stood and walked toward him, each step slow but certain. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, voice low, trembling. He didn't look away. "Because I didn't know if you'd fight for me." There was no blame in his tone, just honesty. And somehow, that hurt more than anger ever could. "I don't want you to go," I said, finally. "Not without me." He blinked, surprised. "What?" I took a breath. "I've been scared, Al. Scared of giving everything. Scared that one day, if you left, I'd be left with nothing. But the truth is, I already gave you everything. You just didn't know it because I didn't say it out loud." Then I looked up at him, eyes glassy, voice barely above a whisper. "Please, don't leave without me." It was the word he'd been waiting for. The one he'd needed to hear, not just in that quiet room a few nights ago, but all along. Please. Not out of weakness, but out of choice. Out of love. It was me finally choosing us, with no holding back. He stepped forward and took my face in his hands, eyes searching mine. "I won't," he said softly. I never was. For a long moment, everything was still. The distance, the silence, the confusion, it all melted into that space between us. We stood there, forehead to forehead, finally understanding each other fully. But just when I thought the story had ended, Al reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded letter. He handed it to me slowly, almost hesitantly. I opened it. It was addressed to me. But it wasn't from him. It was from Leah, my best friend. Dated 2 weeks ago. As I read the first line, my hands began to shake. I never meant for this to happen, but I need to tell you something about Al. I stared at the letter, heart pounding, barely able to focus on the words. Al stood silently, his eyes fixed on me, like he already knew what was in it. I read every line, each one felt like a crack forming across everything I thought I understood. Leah had feelings for him. Had for a while now. She never acted on them, she said, never crossed that line. But she saw something in Al, his patience, his loyalty, that made her fall. And the letter, it was her way of stepping back. Of making sure I saw what she saw, before I lost it. I looked up at Al, and for a second, I couldn't speak. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "She never said anything to me. And I never saw her that way. I swear to you." I believed him. Deep down, I always had. But the twist of knowing someone I trusted so deeply had hidden something so important, it stung. Still, I couldn't deny the bigger truth. Leah's letter wasn't meant to hurt me. It was a mirror. A wake-up call. She'd seen my distance long before I did. And maybe, in her own way, she was trying to help me fight for what I almost lost. I folded the letter, tears sliding down my cheeks. "I almost ruined this," I whispered. "By holding back, by not saying what you needed to hear." Al pulled me close. "But you said it. That's what matters." We spent the next hour just talking. Not about Seattle or Leah or even the future. Just about us. Our fears, our hopes, our stubborn hearts. And slowly, the weight between us began to lift. The next morning, I booked a one-way ticket to Seattle. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because I wasn't letting fear write our story anymore. Al was shocked, but in the best way. "You're sure?" he asked. I smiled. "I made you say please once. Now it's my turn to come without being asked." We left together a week later, hand in hand. And as the plane lifted off the ground, I looked out the window, knowing the past wasn't perfect, but the future was finally something we were building together. To everyone watching, what would you have done in my place? Would you have forgiven? Would you have left? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and tell me if you'd like a sequel to this story. I'd love to hear what happens next, through your eyes.